So the contract with OTAC is just concluding at the end of this month with APD, and we're doing a contract extension for a next phase of this project. And so this part of the monthly webinars is not going to continue, but we are going to be able to come out and do customized training with each of you as providers, as contractors. And I'll be getting a hold of you early in February with what that's going to look like. But it's going to be more of the on-site visits that we did. They won't probably be quarterly. It'll probably be maybe one time during the year, something to that effect. And we are going to have a state conference again, and that will be in April. David Petoniak is coming, and that's the date for that. And but we don't have a site yet. It's April 23rd, but just get that on your calendars if you would, please. Part of what OTAC's going to continue to do is our the competency evaluations, and those are just the field observation that is that someone that's being hired by one of you folks is competent to do that job based on the kinds of things we're looking for in positive behavior support as outlined in the rules, which the rules are coming into effect. So we're going to be continuing on the competency evaluation piece of this, and there will continue to be a registry. That's going to be actually moving over to APD website as Linda gets that up and going, that website, as she's working on it now. So the main services will be competency reviews, coming out to see you folks, and we'll be conferring with you as to what you want to do for training. So this won't be us just having some little show that we bring over there, but it's going to be geared toward what each of you are interested in learning more about, and then we'll have the state conference. Any questions? So it seems like it's pretty clear. So really what I'm saying also is that not only are these monthly webinars not going to be continuing, but also ability for people to call in for kind of individual feedback, kind of talking with us about certain things is one of the things they're phasing out also. Now those really are two pieces of what OTAC was doing that have only been used a little bit. So so that works fine, and conferring with you folks as you get ready to do competency evaluations with how we've done it in the past, and talking about when that's going to work and how things are going is still going to be available, and making this as personalized and easy for you folks as possible. So today I want to ask each of you what topics you would like to bring forth for this final talk. And when I say topic, I'm talking about things that you've either learned a lot from that you want to share with other people around the state, or still sticky places that you find, difficult situations that you've run across. And then I have one that I'm going to be talking about also, and it's a little bit about developmental disabilities before we end. But I first want to find out what you all might want to share some ideas on. So this is going to be a very informal information sharing time with each other. So let's start with Lori. And what kinds of things have you guys encountered lately that have been working? What's been more challenging? Any particular topics that you're encountering that you're running into issues with, like we did hoarding a couple months ago? So I'm kind of talking along those lines of of actual challenges you face in the field?
Challenges in the field, it would probably be more than likely the providers and, the difficulty working with those providers that just aren't open to suggestions, or you walk in and they state, directly right away, and we've talked about this before, that they do not, need these services, nothing's going to help, they've tried everything. So pretty much, having that block as soon as you walk in the door would be the most challenging I've seen as of lately.
I agree. I think that is the most difficult part of what you all are facing, and I think you're just coming to the tip of the iceberg with it too, because from what I hear from APD is that case managers are going to be more or less required, certainly highly encouraged, to put in referrals for clients that have a behavior add-on.
Correct.
Well, the providers for those folks are really mostly interested in the money, really, and they'll rather take a lot of time or to do things differently for the client, but they want it to continue. So you've been in this field for a long time, Lori, so what have you found, what kinds of strategies have you found that works to break through that?
Really getting the buy-in, like we've discussed before, from not only the provider/administrator, but the caregivers as well. So really going on out and getting their buy-in, just making sure that, hey, look, we're trying to make your lives easier. What have you tried? Really getting their input and their buy-in. So it looks like we're really paying attention to them, which we are, but just really making them feel secure with us. And just whatever we can do to try something different. Let's try something very creative when we look at the whole situation. So really just getting them to feel comfortable with us and establishing that rapport so they're more likely to open up and try some of the more creative strategies that we might have with them, which sometimes can take a while to build that.
Yeah, and sometimes there's timing factors that make it really hard because to catch the caregivers, I mean, even in adult foster home, you sometimes have to go outside of the box with what time they're there or what schedule they're on. But I do think it's important to catch each of those people and to coordinate with them on what is working and what kinds of challenges are they seeing and how are they getting through that. That the head person at the place, the provider themselves, probably aren't as invested as the caregivers in seeing things change. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, exactly. And sometimes the caregivers have tried a great strategy that really works, but yet they don't really communicate with the provider or the administrator because they work overnight and they don't think their input matters. So really finding out from as many people as possible and then sharing that with the others.
So how do you get around the issue of not having much time to talk to those caregivers?
Sometimes, especially with the overnight ones, I find out what their shift hours are. So sometimes like they start at 6 p.m., get off at 6 a.m. So what I'll do is try to ask the administrator if I can call them at the beginning of their shift to get their input, or at the end of their shift, try and get them to connect with me over the phone if I can't get out there in person, maybe leaving them personalized notes or like a tracking form so they can kind of track behavior for me. So some form of communication, whether it's over the phone and or going on ahead and doing some documentation with them.
So what kind of tracking form are you finding most useful?
With that, just going on ahead and doing kind of a different type of scatter plot, like you would put down what the providers, administrators, and or the case managers' behavior concerns are. You would list those and then try to have them track down, okay, what times do they occur, like if we're talking overnight shifts, what times do they occur, how long or the duration of that behavior is, what have you tried to mitigate that, and then also before sending that out, like we want them to identify potential presets or triggers. So I'll either talk with them over the phone of what presets or triggers are so that they understand that, because most caregivers I've run into, especially the newer ones, don't understand exactly what presets or triggers are. So training or coaching them on that, and then going down and having them write those out and seeing if those match up with what the caregivers during the day see. I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry, I'm sick right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
no, it's a head cold that came on, so it's more annoying than anything. So I hope that makes sense.
Well, everybody, I was really sick last week. As a matter of fact, I still have a little bit of carryover of that this week. There's just been so much illness around right now.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So when you leave something with the caregivers, are you having success in them actually writing something and getting it back to you?
Some success. I would say it's what I have the most successful with is you leave that documentation, you train whoever's going to do the changeover and shift, how to train that person. But before doing that, I always try to contact the individual that will work nights too. So it's a lot of legwork, but training that person over the phone and then showing the person that's going to hand it over to that individual as well. So you're training a couple people through different means. But it depends on the facility, I think, too, or the foster home. So it varies, but that's usually the best success rate I have is when I work those routes.
And so then when you come back together with a plan, are those caregivers at the meeting also, or just a main provider?
You know, there's always caregivers with the meetings that I've had, but it depends. I have a easier time with assisted living facilities because they do usually have, you know, staffing meetings at least once a month where they do pull in the overnight staff as well. And so I try to get involved with one of those. Now with adult foster homes, that doesn't typically occur. So I'll sit down with as many people, and I'll have to go out there sometimes a couple times and go ahead and get all their input. Then I usually leave a draft for the overnight individuals and ask them to write on it, put their input in, call me with their input. So I still get their feedback on it because they might see something that's not going to work or they've tried. So that's how I usually will try to coordinate with the evening overnight staff.
Excellent. And, you know, I think all of this is, I'm thinking that probably Liz and Jana, you folks are probably doing a lot of things also, and in a few minutes I'll have you share some other little tricks of the trade that you've encountered that are working. And I think that what you've just shared, Lori, isn't going to win all the situations, but I think all of that, this all contributes to making more of the providers get involved with the plan and actually do some things. Because when you go out to the caregivers, they're talking about real problems with real solutions and getting more specific, which the more specific we can be in those plans, the more people will use them.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Jana, I'm going to go to you next on the topic of getting people who are not buying in, don't really care about this referral. How are you finding what's working for you to get cooperation from those folks?
Right. Well, I think a lot of it that I've learned over the years that we've been trying to be successful with this program is that you can't win everyone over. So I think being able to know that when to just stop, do what you need to do for the client, and then do the plan as best you can, and then get out. Because there are those, 10% of providers you're never going to win over. So I try to teach my consultants to really work really hard on the ones who have great buy-in, and also work really hard for those who have partial buy-in, but just to not get upset with some that don't want anything to do with it. But what I do a lot of times is I'll leave a behavior plan there, and I really try to encourage and promote the providers and the caregivers to write all over it, like what works, what doesn't work, and so the tool's right there, and so in essence they're really helping write the plan. And that's been successful a lot of times because it leads them, it gives them ideas already on the plan, and then they can say, well, the person doesn't like grape juice, but she likes apple and orange. And so it allows them to help write the plan, which makes them more accountable. But I agree, it's easier to catch people in the ALF and RCF than the foster homes. With the foster homes, they're so busy. If you can just steal 10 minutes, you're very lucky.
So, yeah, so I wonder if the foster homes as a whole system, I wonder if feedback, if we could give feedback to APD, that there needs to be some kind of way overall to give messages to foster homes about this will make their work easier, not harder. At first, it takes a little time to get the plan in place, but once you get the plan in place, everybody's happier.
True.
But I'm just thinking out loud, and that's something I think we might be able to go back to APD with, that maybe, because I know there's some sort of adult foster home training that happens.
Yep.
And maybe as a system, they can do more training in what's a behavior plan.
Right, or they could allow us to be on the curriculum for that training for new foster homes.
Correct, yes. That's a really good idea, because I imagine there's fairly, you know, that a lot of them get going. I would say there's like new foster homes continually. And on the ones that are, can you hear me?
Yep.
Jenna, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, on the foster homes that are sort of kind of, well, and ALFs and, you know, the whole system, on the ones that are giving you partial listening, what are some ways you draw them in to buying into it?
I think you have to simplify. At times we become really wordy and we want to give all of this information and such, whereas we can, you know, give them some literature and leave there for all the background information on why we're recommending something. But I think we have to be fast and simple. So one week we go in and we go, switch the showers next week to morning instead of evening. That's it. Can you do that? And so I think we have to simplify with the people who are always on the run. Also, calling them later. If we can't get over there later in the evenings or whatever, what's going to work for you? Can I call you at 5 a.m.? Can I call you at 8 p.m.? Can we talk about it on the phone? Is that easier? Sometimes just a phone call is easier for them if they get to choose the time than us coming over there. Because a lot of times when we go over to do a site visit, we cause chaos just by being in the home. It's another person in the home. So a lot of things like that.
That's excellent. That's really good. And just trying one thing at a time. So when you leave a plan with a facility or a home, to write all over and to work through the draft part of it, how long before you come back and get their input?
Usually a week. I don't want to leave it too long because they forget about it. So, you know, in a ALF or an RCF, it's easier because they can put the client on alert times 7 days or 3 days, and then they just implement writing on the behavior plan part of the alert charting. In a foster home, it's harder, but you don't want to leave it too long because they forget about it or they feel forgotten. So you need to go back in a couple days if you can, work that in your schedule, but if you have a full caseload, at least the next week you need to be back over there looking at it, clarifying what they've written, and then trying to create a new one, and then you can leave it again because it's a working model. Yes.
I agree, and a lot of times, I mean, I think those are really good points, Janet, and a lot of times when you're first bringing a strategy in, you know, we're not directly working with that client, and so we're guessing what's going to work, but a lot of times there's subtle changes that need to happen or ideas about that strategy that you would, if you were doing that task with them, you would see, oh, well, this needs changed here or there.
Right.
And so that's what they can give us feedback on. All right. Anything else you want to add to that, Jana?
Nope. I'm good.
Liz, what about you folks over there? You've encountered people who don't have lots of buy-in as you go in. And so what kinds of things have you been finding that are successful to get people on board? Are you there, Liz?
This is Liz from El Taurus, and I'm not sure if the other Liz was ever on. Just
Oh, I got the wrong Liz. I'm sorry.
not
Thank you,
sure.
Liz.
Oh, that's okay. Sure.
Because I thought maybe she's from Yamhill. Okay, well then it's just El Taurus and Willard Ibsen that's on this morning. Okay, so there's the other topic that I wanted to discuss, and Lori and Jana, you know, and your consultants that might be there with you, I'd like after I finish, please feel free to include on this topic as well. One of the things that we find in APD work is people who are in, especially adult foster homes, who have a developmental disability. Oftentimes, it'll be an intellectual disability, which is what we used to call mental retardation, but the ongoing word now is an ID, is what it's called. Capital I, capital D, and that's an intellectual disability, which really is what we used to call mental retardation. Well, there's a number of people from the school system who were mildly mentally retarded, or now we say mildly intellectually disabled, who ended up not really being able to take care of themselves. Now, sometimes they get by for a few years, and maybe they were still living at home, and then their parents passed away, or a family member took them over and cared for them. There's a whole lot of people in that group that kind of are a forgotten generation in a lot of ways, because sometimes they didn't really qualify for voc rehab services, and they didn't really qualify for developmental disability services to be in group homes and all that. So a lot of times they just have been kind of cared for in the community. Well, a number of these people are getting into their 40s, 50s, 60s, and those support systems they had over the years fall away, and they then have other issues that occur, oftentimes another health problem, and they'll end up in APD services. Well, when we have a lot of background with dementia, sometimes it's easy to look at as a behavior consultant that those behaviors may be because of dementia, where in fact it's really a mild intellectual disability. And a few things I just want to point out here, and we are not in the business of diagnosing things for sure. And the problem with their charts is it's not, and their records, it's not going to say what their IQ is or what's going on, but some hallmarks that you can look for are, what's this person's history? Were they cared for? Like I ran into a situation just recently where they really lived at home, then they lived with a nephew, or a uncle for a long time, and then that uncle just decided they'd had enough, and then they went to adult foster care. Well, that's pretty good indications that this person never really lived on their own. And I'm not talking about marriage, and really some of these people can have a history of having gotten married, may even have had children, but we're still very dependent kind of people throughout their lives. And that's kind of what you're going to look for is, were they always dependent kind of people? Did they ever finish school? Did they? And sometimes we can find those things out, and sometimes we can't. But a lot of times in our smaller communities in particular, that history is sort of available out there even though it's not in that person's record, because people just have known this person for a long, long time. Well, we've always known her in our community. I met one lady who had come from Roseburg, and people had always known her. And she had a mild intellectual disability and was kind of sort of able to care for herself, but not really through her whole life. Sort of kept out of trouble, but as things got more complicated in her later years, she needed more care. Well, the reason it becomes helpful to know that it's not dementia, but it's really a lower intelligence level in this person, is that that person can learn new skills. Well, granted, they've been this way a long, long time, and learning something new is going to be really hard, but they can learn with careful sequencing of a task. Let's say they can't remember which cupboards they can get into and which cupboards they shouldn't. Well, if we put a visual strategy on the outside of some cupboards, like a stop sign, it might really help this person and teach them what that stop sign means. Oh, that's so-and-so's cupboard. This one over here is yours, and it might even have their name on it. So we can teach those kinds of things, and they will benefit. This particular individuals with an intellectual disability will benefit from visual reminders a lot. Persons with dementia will forget to connect the meaning of that visual information. That's partly what gets lost with dementia. You know, they'll look at the calendar and they'll think, okay, well, I know this calendar is important, but I don't really get it, what this day means. And I mean, and this can be, it just loses meaning. Some of those kinds of things lose meaning. Well, for a person with intellectual disability, it really means that they learn slower, but it doesn't mean that they can't learn. And sometimes when they've been in a very protected environment in their lives, they never had opportunity to learn some of those things. In their home, maybe every space was available. Maybe they could do all these things. And sometimes we need to just teach them what group living is. So sometimes we start back with the simple, you know, this is my room, this is your room. In a nice way, of course, we're teaching it. But they just don't know those social rules. They don't automatically get those social rules. And one of the things that I know happens also is that people with an intellectual disability will be fairly repetitive in how they approach other people and in what they talk about. It's like, you know, you'll hear the same stories over and over, and you'll hear the same introduction. Well, that's because that's socially all they can think of doing, and they just want social contact. It kind of happens with dementia a little bit, but in particular, people with intellectual disabilities really, really, really want to have friends, and they can't think of how to do it, and so they will come up with that pat line. You know, we all use, hey, how you doing, or how's work been going, but they may have something even more simple that they always plug in there, that they always say the same thing. They always come at other people with the same recounting of all the little details in their day. Well, rather than cut those things off, because social communication is really what helps all of us, what we want to do is just think about broadening their day so they have more to talk about. And we might have to do conversation starters with them. So it's a matter of realizing they lack skills rather than that they've lost skills. And it's just a different focus that is helpful to realize. As you go in, you're going to see signs and symptoms that this person really is lower functioning, not from dementia, but from just their intellectual capacity in general. And again, you know, I don't want to make this too complicated. We're not diagnosticians. But it is helpful to know that that we can approach a person with an intellectual disability a little differently and encourage and shape them, and they will be less annoying to the people around them as they learn more social skills. So that's kind of my little mini lecture for the day, but Lori, I'm going to start back with you folks up there. Anything you can add to this, and how do you handle this diagnostic kind of thing as you get out in the field?
Well, just adding to kind of what you said is when you build them skills, teach them skills, or whatever you want to call it, it also builds up their confidence. And you really do see that when you spend that one-on-one, but it has to be consistent and ongoing, because I have seen quite a few people that have never been diagnosed with an intellectual functioning issue, but I would say more than likely could possibly be like borderline with their intellectual functioning. And so just, they need a lot of encouragement, I see, and you definitely, like you said, you can teach them new skills. With me, I've worked a lot with autism or mild intellectual functioning, and I have taught like one-on-one where they are able to start understanding budgeting or whatever it might be, but you have to spend almost daily with them and to kind of go over it. And with those repetitive teachings, they do catch on, but it does take a lot of effort and a lot of time, and people have to understand that. A lot of patience.
Right, and they have to understand that this person isn't doing this just to be annoying.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, they just don't have the same skill set.
Right.
And so bringing that into them, and a lot of visual cues, a lot of visual aids do help.
Yes. And this is the kind of person that if you put some money in envelopes for certain things, not necessarily to keep in their room where it might end up missing, but with the person, they will let someone else help them manage their money, and then they could see they only have $5 left for magazines or whatever it is. This is the kind of person that really benefits from those very concrete kinds of strategies.
Yeah.
Anything else, Lori?
I'm trying to think. I think you pretty much got that. So yeah.
So when you go into settings, because you have a background in intellectual disabilities from having worked with people down in California, what kinds of things would you suggest that a behavior consultant look at as they start suspecting this person may have a lower intelligence?
Reading and writing is one of the easiest things, I think, to kind of figure out, oh, where did you go to school? Where were you raised? And, finding, oh, well, I went to, what I'll get, and I've had a handful of individuals like, oh, well, I didn't finish school, and they don't want to go into details. Or I was in a special program in school. And when you hear that, even like when you start, oh, did you ever go to school beyond high school? Or, well, I was in a special program. Oh, what kind of special program? Or, just trying to get that out, because they won't say, well, I was in a special ed program or whatever it might be. I was in a speech therapy class or all that stuff, and just trying to find out like the reading and writing, because sometimes I'll be like, oh, hey, what does that say over there? And try to get them to read it to me if it's something special in their room that it looks important to them. Or, hey, having them write something for you. I can't think of an example right now, but sometimes I try to get them.
Well, even writing their name sometimes.
Yeah.
Name writing.
And yeah, it could be something simple as, if they're writing their letters differently than the norm would do so.
Right.
So yeah, I would start out kind of around that area and then kind of go from there. How long, where have they lived throughout their life? Sometimes that will give you an eye-opener, like if they've lived with their parents through their 30s or 40s. Not saying all of them. There are some that maybe they've lived with their parents a long time, and you try to find out why have they lived with their parents, or try to find that part out, because they might have needed a lot of extra assistance along the way, which their family has provided to them.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, those are good hints. Jana, what kinds of thoughts do you have about this?
Not much, really. I agree with Lori, is that just trying to figure out a little bit more of their upbringing and their history there can tell you a lot. Spending more time with them, more one-on-one, is definitely needed, and so going back to getting buy-in from the provider there is harder. They need a little bit more one-on-one versus a large group setting.
Yes, yes. The strategies that you choose to use are going to require a little more time from a provider at first. But as it goes on, they actually can be a little more independent sometimes.
I think they're more eager to be independent for sure, yeah, than some others. My concern, with CED population is they're aging more into the senior population now, and a lot are, getting Alzheimer's and dementia, which complicates everything completely. Yes. It's a whole different avenue.
Yes, it certainly is. Well, and although these folks are often staying in the developmental disability system, but there's a number of people they're starting to recognize with Down syndrome who develop significant dementia and Alzheimer's. And some of those folks we could end up in APD. Hard to say where that's going to go in the long run.
I guess where the more funding is.
Yes. Yeah. So that's really all I had prepared for today. And so I'm going to go back with Lori for a minute and see if there's anything else you wanted to talk about today or anything else we should cover.
Not at this time. I didn't really write down a bunch of topics beforehand, so sorry. But yeah,
no, that's okay. I didn't get an agenda out ahead.
No, it's okay. But no, I really have appreciated these calls and these trainings, and for all my staff to really be able to join in and get feedback. It's been really supportive.
Great. Well, and I'm hoping, like today we have this on tape, that you all, and we have them all of these have been taped, that you can share those with your staff at various times that you think of, oh yeah, we did talk about developmental disabilities, or we did talk about hoarding. Let's pull that tape out again. Jana, anything else you want to bring up today?
No, I'm good.
Excuse me.
Okay, well then thanks so much for joining me. And this is, like I say, our last one, but I will be conferring with you guys about your individual sessions as we come up into February. Okay?
Sounds great.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.